Good evening, members, officers, members of the public, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Development Committee, 24th of August 2023. I will now read out the emergency evacuation announcement. There are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm goes off, please leave the building in an orderly fashion through the nearest fire exit. If you familiarise yourselves with those, we have at the back or the side there. The meeting, the assembly place is for the on the grass out at the front on the island, out at the front of the building. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note that the meeting will be live streamed. Please switch off mobiles or turn them to silent. Please note that toilet and hand washing facilities are in the foyer area. Those observant amongst you will note that my vice chair is not here tonight. That will come up in the apologies for absence, but I am advised that for me to have a vice chair for the night, that I need to ask for a vote, and I would like to propose that Councillor Efti is my vice chair for the night tonight. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mrs. Mason. All in favour? Thank you very much. Councillor Efti, if you care to join me, please. Thank you. Okay, members of the public are reminded that this is an official council meeting and that the applications will be debated according to the procedure rules set out in the council's constitution. Members of the public, can you please note that you are not permitted to speak at this meeting unless you've registered to speak with Democratic Services. In this way, everyone present will be able to hear the debate and councillors will be able to make an informed decision. Can I please also remind you to be respectful of all those attending the meeting, including other members of the public, councillors and officers. Members of the public, while you are, of course, entitled to film or take photographs during this meeting, can I please emphasise to you that this should be done without disruption to the meeting and can only be done from a designated area in the public seating. Can I please therefore ask you to raise your hand clearly in the air if you wish to take photographs or film this evening? I don't see any hands, so thank you very much. Members, your voice will only be captured on the live stream when your microphone is switched on, so please remember to switch on your microphone when you are invited to speak and switch off again when not speaking. Members, voting will be done on a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands for and then against recommendations, and will also ask for a show of hands for those wishing to abstain from voting. Agenda items 1 and 2. Apologies for absence and substitutes. We have received apologies for absence from councillors Mrs. Wilson, Councillor Mrs. Shaw, and Councillor Knight. Councillor Mrs. Mason will be substituting for Councillors Mrs. Wilson and Councillor Foster, substituting for Councillor Mrs. Shaw. Non-members attending, we have Councillor Cross and Councillor Booth. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of July 2023. Are the minutes agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 5, to declare, to receive declarations of interest. For clarity, can I just remind members that we now have 3 categories of pecuniary interests, which are as follows: disclosable pecuniary interests, DPI, other registrable interest, ORI, and non-registrable interest, NRI. So do I have any members who need to declare an interest? Okay. Do I take it that's a no? Okay. Thank you, members. Now, before we move on to the business of tonight, I am aware that the two applications that we will be discussing tonight are contentious. When I joined the council in 2016 and started to get involved with planning, I was quite surprised at the limiting that there was within deciding on planning applications. To make that clear, we as a committee can only refuse an application on the grounds of law or on planning policy. So with that in mind, I'd like to invite officers to do the, oh, hang on a minute, so sorry. I need to actually backtrack there a little bit. We have had an addendum to the applications which has come out today. Have all members seen that, and any of the speakers who are in the audience, have you all seen that? If you haven't, can you indicate? Okay. There are two addendums. There was one that came out today. If you haven't seen it, I am minded to adjourn and give you a copy so as you can actually see it, so as we are being fully transparent. Okay, so you haven't seen it? Councillor Mrs Mason?
No, I've seen the one that came out today. I haven't seen another one. I've just got addendum 2. No one's given me addendum 1.
Okay, in that case then, I am going to adjourn for 10 minutes and I will give an opportunity for anyone who needs to actually see those addendums to actually read and digest what's in there. We'll come back to you shortly. Thank you. For clarity, I should say that the addendums have been produced by our officers in response to comments that have been received at the last minute from residents. And the idea of this is to actually be totally clear and transparent in the way that we are conducting this meeting. So thank you. Okay, thank you for your patience, everybody. We'll reconvene the meeting. And we shall start off now with, I shall ask Katie Fowler to present the officer's report. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application site is located on Trenders Avenue. The site is formed of a parcel of land which is edged red here and measures a site area of some 0.29 hectares. Trenders Avenue is a private single track road. The site is the site is partway up the road and is opposite to the properties here. So we have Pine Cottage, Mill Cottage, the barn, and the properties on Heron Stream Place. The site is to the north of a public right-of-way footpath, which runs along here. Sorry, my hand is shaky. The site is currently occupied by a stable block and is enclosed along part of the eastern and southern boundaries by a closed board fence. I'm just going to take members through some photos of the site. So this is the access point into the site. You can see the gate and then the closed board fence that goes along the southern and eastern boundaries. This photo just depicts the public right-of-way that runs to the south of the site. Here you have more of a photo of the closed board fence against Trenders Avenue. Here you can begin to see the residential properties. So you have Pine Cottage with the white render and then Mill Cottage. This marks the entrance into Heron Stream Place, and you can see the dwellings there. And then again, just the Pine Cottage and Mill Cottage on Trenders Avenue. And the public right-of-way footpath again. This is just to try to show over into the site. There's a better photo later on, but just to demonstrate what the stable building looks like to a degree. And obviously you can see the vegetation that demarcates some of that eastern boundary on Trenders Avenue. So this part, although the closed board fence looks similar to the application site, this actually demarcates the boundary of the barns. So this is a fork in the road of Trenders Avenue. So you have Trenders Avenue still continuing up here to the north, but then also to the west. And you have some soft landscaping. This is not in the red line boundary of the application site, but does demarcate between the application site and Trenders Avenue. Again, this photo just shows that soft landscaping. So it's not within the red line site boundary, but is demarcating the site from Trenders Avenue. And then a similar photo again. And then this photo just shows a little bit more into the site. So you can see the stable block building that exists, and then some of what would have been grazing land at some point. And you can also see just in the background of the photo, the existing hedgerow, which is within the site boundary. So members may recall that the stable block which exists on site was tied to a Section 106 agreement. This Section 106 agreement stated that the stable block was to be removed at such a time as the land edged in blue on the plan on the screen becomes unavailable for use for the grazing of horses. It's the council's understanding that the land edged in blue is no longer available for use of the grazing of horses, and therefore the building at present is unlawful. Discussions have taken place with the planning agent for the scheme, who considers the building to be lawful. The planning agent is of the view that the building is lawful, as the Section 106 attempted to govern or restrict the use of the stable building in connection with the grazing land. Therefore, the assessment set out within the officer's report has considered the building as being retained if it were unlawful, and as a change of use if it were lawful. Planning permission is sought for the change of use of land for the stationing of 2 pitches for a Romany gypsy family. Each pitch would include 1 mobile home and 1 touring caravan. So the dark blue rectangles demarcate the mobile homes here and here, and then these 2 lighter blue rectangles would be the touring caravans. This grey building shows the stable block that would be retained as a day room, and then you can see the existing vegetation that goes around the boundaries of the site to be retained, and then here, also here, and then along these boundaries. And then there's also some proposed vegetation within the site too. The application site is located within the Greenbelt where restrictive policies apply. The National Planning Policy for Traveller Sites sets out that traveller sites in the Greenbelt are inappropriate development, which is harmful by definition. In addition, the proposal would have an impact on the openness of the Greenbelt. In terms of the proposal's contribution towards the purpose of Greenbelt land, the development would constitute urban sprawl and encroachment. The proposal would therefore be considered to have a greater impact on openness and would fail to meet the aims and purposes of allocating land within the Greenbelt. Any harm to the Greenbelt is attributed substantial weight, which must be clearly outweighed by very special circumstances. The very special circumstances of the application have been set out within the officer report. These include the existing lack of local provision, the lack of alternative accommodation, and the personal circumstances of the applicant. Members should be aware that, in particular, it should be noted that the best interest of children are a primary consideration in this application, as the site would accommodate children under 16, and were permission refused, the family would be forced to live on the side of the road. Although not necessarily a determinative issue, no other consideration must be considered to be more important or given more weight. The best interest of children must be at the forefront of decision makers' minds when they are exercising all planning judgments involved in this case. It is considered that there are a number of matters which are considered to weigh significantly in favour of the application, and this conclusion would be consistent with the outcome of recent appeal decisions. In respect of the day room, the officer report has set out that whether the building is considered to be lawful or unlawful, the day room would be acceptable in connection with the proposed use. If unlawful, there are very special circumstances which exist that outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt, and if lawful, then it would be appropriate development as a change of use is considered acceptable in the Greenbelt. The cumulative weight of these considerations are considered to clearly outweigh the substantial harm to the Greenbelt. Moving on to other considerations, whilst the development would not be typical for the character of Trenders Avenue, the proposal must not be discriminated against because the homes of the ethnic group do not look like those of the settled communities. Conditions have been imposed regarding the landscaping on site with the intention of better integrating the development within the street scene. Further, the proposed development would not be considered to impact upon the setting of the nearby listed building. A number of comments have been received regarding the impact on nearby residential properties. It is considered that there would be sufficient separation with these properties so that the proposed development would not have an overbearing, overshadowing, or overlooking impact that would be unreasonable. The material considerations pertaining to the impact on residential amenity have been laid out within the officer report and found to be acceptable. The proposed development is considered to provide sufficient access and parking. Although no specific details of the foul drainage have been submitted, a condition has been recommended requiring these details. There are a number of trees and hedges around the perimeter of the application site. However, the proposed development would not be within the root protection area of any of those trees. Finally, the application site would not be considered to exhibit any habitats of protected species, and therefore the proposal would not have an impact upon ecology. Members will be familiar with the addendum that was circulated. The addendum made reference to a floor plan of the day room that has now been provided and an updated site plan. The addendum recommended that a number of conditions were updated to reflect the updated references of those plans. It also recommended the foul drainage condition be amended to include an implementation timeframe. The application is recommended for approval, Chairman, subject to the conditions set out within the officer report and those amended on the addendum.
Thank you, Katie. The ward members for this site are Councillors Newport, Stanley and Cripps. Before I hand over to them, we have three public speakers on this item. Councillor Alistair Matthews, speaking on behalf of Rawth Parish Council. Councillor Matthews, please take your place at the microphone to the side here, please. You have 5 minutes to speak, and I'll let you know when you've got a minute left. Thank you.
Rawth Parish Council expressed deep disappointment with the officer's recommendations. It appears that lack of conviction in the past to enact the agreed policy to accommodate travellers' needs has led to the various unlawful sites, mainly situated in the parish of Rawth. These have been given the go-ahead by government inspectors because of Rochester District's failure to fulfil their obligations under their policy. This application becomes difficult to refuse. Nevertheless, we believe all the objections are still valid and should be given due consideration. This site is typical of several in the Rayleigh Park site where permission has been given in exceptional circumstances similar to this application. In this case, there are several anomalies. Although a very late addendum has been issued to try to address residents' concerns, I think it is relevant to repeat some of the concerns so members can get a clearer picture of this case. The application is under a previous landowner's name who confirms he sold the land 2 years ago to the Travellers family. The last known address to the family was in Cranford Park Drive, where sporadic development has taken place over the years. There is a primary school within a short distance next to the Robert Frew Medical Centre, and Bromford School is nearby. Trenders Avenue, in contrast, is half a mile further to Southend Hospital, which was one of the reasons that was quoted, whereas St Nicholas is half a mile up an inadequate narrow road, poorly lit with high hedges both sides in places. The only safe way is to drive, so increasing further the existing congestion on Raworth Lane. It is important to refer to the residents' comments, Appendix 1, where inaccuracies were highlighted. It is admitted that the development would have an adverse effect on the open aspect of the green belt in the planning report. The only justification for approval is on exceptional circumstances, of which further questions and clarification is needed. In view of this late clarification and the initial confusing and inaccurate planning application, it seems relevant to quote Bob Neal, Under Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, when giving guidance under the law. Planning permission can be refused on the grounds that information provided was insufficient to accurately describe the nature and anticipated impacts of the proposed development. Over many years, this parish council has requested that the district council should have a policy to cover development in this unique area of Rayleigh Park to preserve the character of housing distribution and wildlife conservation. What was an open aspect in the green belt had a stable block erected with the condition that adequate grazing was available. This never materialized, so an enforcement order was imposed, but like so many similar violations in the district, was not enforced due to the serious lack of resources in that department. Whilst we have sympathy to the family's problems, it is beholden to this district to provide another district's displaced family a safe site, adding to the already inadequate revision to the existing district's needs provided for in the development plan. Both surface and foul drainage are existing problems in Rayleigh Park. Surface water is drained through individual plots with various standards of maintenance, most of which ends up in regular flooding in Watery Lane. Through new higher standards, no foul water should enter surface water systems. The Environmental Agency need to monitor and approve any new applications prior to approval. Any new development should not have an adverse effect on existing residents, given that there is no right to an unrestricted view. This has been addressed by the residents' written response. It is unfortunate that the perception is given that travellers are given special provision in the green belt and can give rise to ill feeling in the settled community, where modest applications are refused on the grounds of green belt. Attempts to communicate with what has turned out to be the applicant over the years, when seen on site, have been rejected, making integration into the existing community difficult to achieve. We ask that this application should be either deferred or rejected. The report and updates have come at short notice, giving little time to respond adequately. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Second speaker is Mr. Green, who is speaking on behalf of the applicants. Mr. Green, please take your place at the seat, and you have 5 minutes to speak. And as I said to the others, I will give you the 1 minute morning when you got towards the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. I'm Nathaniel Green from Green Planning Studio, and I'm speaking on behalf of our client, Thomas Scott. This application is here to decide the matter on planning issues only, and this application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. The application is for a change of use of land and building for the stationing of caravans for the residential purposes. It is accepted that development in the Metropolitan Greenbelt is inappropriate, but the fact that the council officers have recommended approval shows that officers have accepted that there are very special circumstances to overcome this. Due to the Greenbelt boundary being tightly drawn around existing settlements, it is unlikely that you'd be able to put anything anything other than Greenbelt land. As your officer report explains in great detail from paragraphs 2.24 to 2.35, there is a fundamental need in the district other than windfall sites such as these that will not be met in the foreseeable future. Rochford District Council accepts that there is a requirement for at least 10 pitches, and that is likely to be an underestimate. Our client and his family are accepted as having gypsy status by the council. It is also accepted by the council that their present living arrangements involves doubling up with other members of the extended family due to the site that they are on being closed down by the owner. As a result, the sites they are forced to live on are in breach of their own planning permissions. As also noted in your report at 2.34, it is not for the applicant to establish whether there are available sites, but for the council. The council cannot demonstrate a 5-year land supply of deliverable gypsy sites, and this, coupled with the lack of formal policy regarding windfall sites such as this one, constitutes a failure of policy that also counts heavily in favour of the application. This application therefore demonstrates more than one very special circumstance that is required to outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt. Allowing this application will allow the family to have a stable base for their 4 children that will allow them to have an education. It will also allow the applicant's mother, who has health issues, to have access to local health facilities, whereas at present she has to travel 2 hours for medical care. The site lies in countryside that is well screened on 3 sides by existing vegetation, and the proposed plan shows that further planting of trees and hedges will be implemented primarily to the north and the west. The nearest occupied dwelling is 38 metres away to the east across Trenders Avenue, and as all structures will be single storey, there will be no overlooking. There is considered to be no impact upon highways, and it will also have little ecological impact upon the immediate area. However, an ecological enhancement condition will be accepted. Further to paragraph 2.57, I can confirm that the indicative floor plans have been supplied to show the conversion of the stable block into a day room of a suitable site for 2 pitches. There have been discussions as to whether the stable block is lawful or not, as mentioned earlier, and whether it constitutes a new building or a change of use. It has also been suggested that the description of the development be amended to refer to the retention of the building. This suggested change to the description of the development was not agreed on the basis that the building has planning permission. The retention of something is also not an active development, with the only other option being the material change of use of the building. The building exists and was erected with the benefit of planning permission 0200235. The 2002 planning permission did not impose any conditions in relation to the use of the building or its removal. The Section 106 agreement sits alongside the planning permission for the building, and it attempts to govern or restrict the use of the stable building in connection with the use of an area of land for the grazing of horses. Should the planning council grant the planning permission for the change of use of the building, which would be ancillary to the use of the land for the stationing of caravans for residential purposes, then the Section 106 agreement would cease to have any practical or meaningful effect, as the building would have a new permitted purpose. The recommendation comes with 11 conditions, and even allowing for the amended conditions, our client is happy to comply with them. And on this basis, I urge you to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Please return to your seat. Third speaker is Mr. Dagg, who is speaking on behalf of the residents objecting to the application. Mr. Dagg, please take your place at the microphone. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone on. Chairman, members, I'm John Dagg. I'm instructed by Mrs. Paula Fisher and representing residents in Heron Stream Place and Trenders Avenue. You've got a full report. I obviously can't go through all of the details now. What I seek to do is to draw members' attention to particular points which I'd ask you to consider in balancing the planning considerations in the case. Gypsy and traveller applications, as you well know, present particular issues, and that's why government has issued a separate policy document, Planning Policy for Traveller Sites, as referred to in the officer report. Can I just refer you to the government's overarching aim, paragraph 3 of that document, to ensure fair and equal treatment for travellers in a way that facilitates the traditional and nomadic way of life of travellers while respecting the interests of the settled community. And then there are a number of points set out in the aims, and I can just refer you to some of those: to increase the number of traveller sites in appropriate locations with planning permission, to reduce tensions between settled and traveller communities, and also for local planning authorities to have due regard to the protection of local amenity and the local environment. When you look at this policy document, it's important to bear in mind it stands alongside the NPPF as an important consideration, and of course alongside your own development plan. You have to consider, of course, the development plan and all of the other material considerations. Your development plan has got policy in it, of course, in respect of traveller sites, and also, of course, it has policy in it with regard to design and amenity, and I'll come to that later. It's not disputed that there's a deficiency of provision in this district. You all know what the difficulties are. I'm not going to dispute what the officer had to say about that. The site's in the green belt. It's acknowledged by the officer in the report that harm to both the openness and the appearance of the green belt will arise. That's the starting point. The recommendation to grant planning permission is based on the conclusion that there were very special circumstances and it's a very important and, there is compliance with all other material considerations. As will be seen from the report, this conclusion is the outcome of a balancing exercise. I submit that some important considerations have not been given sufficient weight and that the balance can reasonably be tipped against the grant of permission. I also comment on the evidence which has been confidentially provided going to the applicant's claimed gypsy status and his family's circumstances. I deal now with context. As you all know, every site is different and every case should be considered on its own individual merits. While this site is, of course, in the green belt, it's also very close to existing housing. There's a significant settled community adjacent. There are 13 residents in the vicinity, 8 of whom are in the immediate vicinity. And of course, there are also houses strung along Trenders Avenue to the south of this site. If you have any doubt about this, please do resolve in due course to have a site inspection before you finally determine the matter. To the immediate east of this site is an area which was called Searles Yard. It was redeveloped more than 10 years ago. It's now Heron Stream Place and Trenders Mews. There are 6 houses there. They are very close to this proposed gypsy and traveller site. The entrance to the traveller site is immediately opposite the gate to Heron Stream Place, and also to the immediate east of the site of the long-standing Mill Cottage and Pine Cottage, while to the north of the barn, Lakeside Barn and Trenders Hall. The officers
1 minute left.
Already dealt with that. Can I just suggest that this proposal would be in conflict with policy D1 of your own development plan? If you have a look at your own development plan, it goes to ensure that new development should respect and make a positive contribution towards the built environment. Look at your own policy DM1, design of new developments, particularly at points 9 and 11 with regard to scale and form appropriate to the locality. Just a word about evidence. I suggest that some of the evidence that's been put forward here has been rather unsatisfactory. My clients haven't had the opportunity to consider it. It only appeared when it was in the officer report. What has emerged, which is of great interest, in the second addendum, is that the family here, the Scott family, do at the moment have somewhere where they can live. There is no immediate pressure on that family.
Can I
And
ask you
in
to
the
bring
particular
your points to
circumstances,
a close, please?
I would submit that it would be reasonable to refuse planning permission on the basis of inappropriateness of the development in relation to housing close by, the unsatisfactory access for caravan traffic, and the impact on local character and amenity. Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry I overran really slightly. Thank you very
That's
much.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Dagg. If you'd like to return to your seat. I'd now turn to ward members. And ward members, are there any visiting members wishing to speak? No, thank you. Ward members first. Councillor Stanley, do you wish to speak as ward member? You have the opportunity to, as ward member, to speak first. Microphone, please. Microphone, please. Sorry.
Can I speak to the officer's report and then at the end categorise what I wanted to say?
Yeah, if I just make it clear to everybody, I will give everyone 5 minutes, but in the interest of giving every councillor the opportunity to speak, you'll have the 5 minutes and then you'll have a right to reply. So if we can just bear that in mind, that would be great.
Yeah. Is that 5 minutes in relation to what the officers have said?
Yes.
Oh, right, okay. I wanted to come back at the end, but
You will have a right to reply.
have I?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Could I ask the officers if the flooding area, would that, is that controlled in any shape or form as to how far that flooding area would come? Also, would it be possible to include ward councillors for the hedges and fencing that's going to be erected? And would it not be practical for the EA to, on the foul drainage on page 3 of the amendment, would it be not possible for the EA to give the approval of the foul drainage and not the local authority, as we do not understand foul drainage in our council? Can we also, I don't see any details of rainwater collections from the buildings, and also could we have a time limit put in to these according to the foul drainage and also to the rainwater as a time limit, or if or how long will it take them to put that in place? One little thing I wanted to ask is the size of the day room, as the building has not been, can I say, legitimised in the way of enforcement. Is the size of that building smaller or larger than the 2 day rooms that would have to go on that site? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. I have Councillor Jack Lawman first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't got anything to say about that. What it is, I've read all the documents thoroughly and I've listened to what the officers and the various people have said. This is a very complex, in my opinion, very complex and involved case. And to understand this, I'm not totally unfamiliar with this area. I'm not a local councillor there, totally unfamiliar. And for me to understand all of this in its proper form and to understand what's being said, I'd like to put forward the motion that we defer this to a site visit before we can come to any conclusion.
Okay, do I have a second? Councillor Ward. Okay. Those in favour, sorry. Does anyone want to speak to the motion? Okay, in that case, I'll take it straight to a vote. Those in favour of deferral to for a site visit? Okay. Okay, thank you. Those against? Any abstain? Thank you. That motion is carried. So this application is deferred for a site visit by the committee. Right, so we now move on to agenda item 7. Land west side junction of Magnolia Road and Lincoln Road, Rochford. Members, again, there is additional information relating to this application set out in the addendum, which obviously everyone has had a chance this evening to view. Again, I'm going to ask Katie Fowler to present the officer's report. Thank you.
Before we do that, Mr. Chairman, point of order, if we have deferred the other one, and this is a very, very similar application, may I suggest this one is deferred as well for a site visit? Can I propose that before we have this to save the committee's time?
Can I just take advice on that a minute?
Yes.
Okay then, so Councillor Constable, you are recommending deferral of this for a site visit?
For a site visit as per the other application, as they are very, very similar in context. It would be beneficial if we had a site visit, and I'm just trying to save everyone's time tonight, and not go through all the other stuff for it.
Okay, so do we have a seconder? Councillor Myers? Anyone want to speak to it? Councillor Mrs Mason?
Thank you, Chair. I will speak to the deferral, and having read the report and knowing the area well, I am pleased to support the move for deferral for a site visit. It's a very awkward access. It's a very difficult situation, and there is a lot of concern about this application. And I do think we need to look at it very carefully and with the fullest knowledge that we can, and the site visit will afford us that information. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just being advised that it would probably be quite useful if we had the full presentation, so as we understand what actually the application is in its fullest. So as when we do have the site visit, then there may be things that we could then be alerted to that we might need to actually be mindful of. So with your agreement, I will ask Katie to do the presentation for us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, we'll come back to the motion after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The application site is located on the corner of Magnolia Road and Lincoln Road. So you can see the site as outlined in red. And then this road that runs up to the east of the site is Lincoln Road. And then this one is Magnolia Road. The site is formed of an area of land that measures some 0.8 hectares. Magnolia Road and Lincoln Road are private roads. The site is adjoined to the north by Doric Lodge, which you can see here. To the west is Wayside Lodge here. And then opposite the site on the east is the Glen or Shallin, the Friendly Cattery. The site is largely unoccupied with the exception of a couple of dilapidated buildings, which you'll see from my photos in a second. So this was taken from the site access. You can see, obviously, it's mostly grazing land, and then there's the two horses in the background of the photo. And this just shows part of one of the dilapidated buildings. I'll zoom in on the next photo, then you can see. So you have the remains of what probably once was a stable building, but obviously can't be used for that anymore. And then a building of some sort there also. And then a similar photo as well. So you can see the application site here. You can see the bounds of trees surrounding the site, also through the middle of it, and then grazing land around that. So this looks onto the southern boundary that runs parallel to Magnolia Road. And this also looks onto the southern boundary parallel to Magnolia Road. Here you can see the site access with the gates and existing boundary treatments. And then again from Lincoln Road looking onto the site access. You can also start to see up Lincoln Road at this point, and either side it being encompassed by hedgerows and trees. And then a similar photo of the access point. This is looking up Lincoln Road towards Doric Lodge. This photo is looking back towards Magnolia Road in the background, but still on Lincoln Road. And then finally, this photo is looking westward on Magnolia Road with the application site on the right-hand side. And then on the left-hand side behind that hedgerow is the railway line. Planning permission is sought for the change of use of land for the stationing of 2 pitches for 2 Romany Gypsy families. Each pitch would include 1 mobile home, 1 touring caravan and 1 day room. So just for clarification, the mobile homes would be the dark blue rectangles, the day rooms, the pink rectangles, and then the light blue rectangles, the touring caravans. The application site is located within the Greenbelt where restrictive policies apply. The National Planning Policy for Traveller Sites sets out that traveller sites in the Greenbelt are inappropriate development, which is harmful by definition. In addition, the proposal would have an impact on the openness of the Greenbelt, and in terms of the proposal's contribution towards the purposes of Greenbelt land, the development would constitute urban sprawl and encroachment. The proposal would therefore be considered to have a greater impact on openness and would fail to meet the aims and purposes of allocating land within the Greenbelt. Any harm to the Greenbelt is attributed substantial weight, which must be clearly outweighed by very special circumstances. The very special circumstances of the application have been set out within the officer report. These include the existing lack of local provision, the lack of alternative accommodation, and the personal circumstances of the applicant. Members should be aware that, in particular, the best interests of children are a primary consideration in this application, as the site would accommodate children under 16, and were permission refused, the families would be forced to live on the side of the road. Although not necessarily a determinative issue, no other consideration must be considered to be more important or given more weight. The best interests of children must be at the forefront of decision makers' minds when they are exercising all planning judgments involved in this case. It is considered that there are a number of matters which are considered to weigh significantly in favour of the application, and this conclusion would be consistent with the outcome of the recent appeal decisions. The cumulative weight of these other considerations are considered to clearly outweigh the substantial harm in the Greenbelt. Whilst the development would not be typical for the character of Magnolia Road or Lincoln Road, the proposal must not be discriminated against because the homes of this ethnic group do not look like those of the settled communities. Conditions have been imposed regarding the landscaping on site with the intention of better integrating the development within the street scene. It is considered that there would be sufficient separation with the properties nearby to the development so that the proposal would not have an overbearing, overshadowing or overlooking impact that would be unreasonable. The material considerations pertaining to the impact on residential amenity have been laid out within the officer report and found to be acceptable. The proposed development is considered to provide sufficient access and parking. Although no specific details of the foul drainage have been submitted, a condition has been recommended requiring these details. It is highlighted that the site is within an area at risk of surface water flooding. As such, a condition has been recommended to be imposed requiring a surface water drainage scheme to be agreed with the local planning authority. There are a number of trees and hedgerows around the perimeter of the application site. Some of the proposed hard standing would likely be within the root protection area of a number of these trees. As such, a condition has been recommended requiring an arboricultural impact assessment be submitted. An ecological appraisal was submitted with the application, which highlighted that the site encompassed potential habitats for a number of protected and priority species. Subject to the implementation of the recommended mitigation and safeguarding measures outlined in this appraisal, it is considered that no significant harm to any habitats or faunal species of interest would occur. Members will be familiar with the addendum that was circulated, and this recommended that a number of conditions were updated to reflect the updated reference of the amended site plan. It also included the foul drainage condition be amended to include an implementation timeframe. The application is recommended for approval, Chairman, subject to the conditions set out within the officer report and those amended on the addendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Now, I've been having discussions while you've been presenting. I do apologise for that. But I think in order to be fair and to give a similar kind of opportunity for members to understand what they're going to be looking at this site, that I should allow the public speakers to present. So in that case, we have 3 speakers. And the first is Councillor Weir, speaking on behalf of Hawkwell Parish Council. Councillor Weir, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and you'll have 5 minutes to speak. And I will let you know when you have a minute left. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mara Weir, representing Hawkwell Parish Council. To consider the mixed use of keeping of a horse and stabling of caravans in the land and laying of hard standing. See now, actually, we've talked about 2 caravans, and now, now they're talking about 2 caravans, 2 day centres, and 2. What do you call?
Councillor Weir, would it help if you have your submission written?
Yes.
Would it help if someone reads it for you?
No, it's all right.
Okay.
The site is within the green belts, and the council has previously refused the use of this because of its green belt status. When the land was auctioned in 2021, the Rochford District Council stated that no planning permission could be permitted, and don't feel there's any changes to warrant this regarding any development. Policy E, traveller site in the green belt, appropriate development is harmful to the green belt and should not be approved, except in very special circumstances. This has not been demonstrated. Hawkwell Parish Council and many of the 100+ residents who have registered objection to this application set a precedent for similar applications in the green belt. Owners of green belt and who live nearby area could sell their land for more gypsy sites. Once the land is occupied, planning enforcement to prevent any expansion is difficult. The applicant has provided no response to the question, and there is no trees or hedges on the land adjacent to the proposed development site. Hawkwell Parish Council manages the site, Magnolia Road, adjacent to this development, and we are worried that our nature reserve can actually come under pressure from existing and many people using it. The local plan is due in 2023. It's likely to include Michelin Farm site as a preferred option for a gypsy and traveller site. The lack of a 5-year plan may in part have led to the granting of some planning appeals on traveller sites. What is actually needed is one site which can be controlled, not a couple here and a couple there. There should be a proper site. The applicant has provided no response to the question, is the site at risk of flooding? The parish council is aware that the application site floods severely in the winter months, and the service water runs from Ashington Heights down to Lincoln Road and Durham Road, which has no drainage on Magnolia Road. The site sits in stagnant water at times, and although the application forms reference to the government flood map, which says the flood risk of Essex County Council, the flood authority for the area, and its maps, it says the site is categorised as a high risk of flooding. Hawkwell Parish Council cannot identify on the plans any area for stabling of horses, which was one of the primary uses of the land listed on the application site. Hawkwell Parish Council would ask, but Rochford District Council to explore why this matter has not been admitted to the application.
I have let your time run on.
That's it.
If I can just give you notice, I'll give you another minute.
Right,
Okay.
thank you.
Are you finished? Yeah? Okay, thank you, Councillor Weir. If you'd like to return to your seat, the second speaker is Mr. Green again, who is speaking on behalf of the applicants. Mr. Green, please take your place at the microphone and you have 5 minutes. Again, I will give you 1 minute notice and get to the end.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. Yes, you probably remember who I am. And I have to say, a lot of what I'm going to say is going to sound very similar because most of the principles involved are very similar on both sites, but obviously there are certain practical aspects of each site that are different. Nonetheless, I still need to go through this so that you get the, as the agent, the full sort of thrust of our arguments again. Once again, I must remind you that this must be decided on planning issues only, and it is recommended for approval subject to conditions. And the application is for the mixed use of the keeping of horses and stationing of caravans for residential use and laying of hard standing and the erection of day room ancillary to that use, in effect 2 gypsy pitches. It is accepted that development in the Metropolitan Green Belt is highly inappropriate, but the fact that the council officers have recommended approval show that the officers have accepted that there are very special circumstances to overcome this. Again, similar situation is that the green belt boundaries are drawn extremely tightly, and so it is unlikely you will find any other land other than green belt. As your officer's report again explains in paragraphs, in this case paragraphs 217 to 224, there is a fundamental need in the district other than windfall sites such as these that will not be met in the foreseeable future. And again, there is at least a requirement for at least 10 pitches, and again, that is likely to be underestimated. Our client and his family are accepted as having gypsy status by the council. It is accepted the council that their present living arrangements, again, also involve doubling up with other family members. And again, I must remind you that it is not for the applicant to establish whether there are available sites for the council. Also must remind you that the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year land supply, and that the formal lack of policy constitutes the failure of policy, and that acts in favour of the application. And therefore, the application demonstrates more than one very special circumstance is required to outweigh the harm to the greenbelt. 2 families involved. The Connors, this will allow the Connors to have a stable base for their 8 children. That will allow them to have an education that at present they do not have access to. In particular, one child will then be able to access a special needs school that at present the child is unable to do so, lacking a formal address. The same child also has a health issue that a stable base will assist. Clearly, I can't go into details on these. The Gaskins children are already in a local school, and this will ensure that they continue to receive their education. Again, one child has a learning difficulty, and this proximity to the child's existing school will assist its education. You will also note from your report that 2 members of the family have mental health issues that a settled environment will assist. And another child has a medical issue that is treated in London, and the site's proximity to London will help in that regard. The site lies in countryside that is well screened on 2 sides by dense vegetation. The developed area is on the eastern side of the site, where it is surrounded by scrub. The proposed plan shows that a further planting of trees and hedges will be implemented primarily along the entranceway, although further planting can be conditioned. The nearest occupied dwelling is 28 metres away to the north, and as all structures will be single-storey, there will be no overlooking, and there is considered by officers to be no impact upon highways. A comprehensive ecological survey was undertaken this year, and it confirms that no statutory or non-statutory designations are present within the site. It recommended some ecological enhancements to be implemented, and these are in the conditions. The site is close to bridleways, and as the application is also for the keeping of horses, this will have significant safety and welfare benefits of the keeping horses off the road network.
1 minute.
Thank you. Issues have been raised regarding flooding. You may note from the plan that the whole of the hard standing is permeable. And in fact, permeable hard standing is of greater permeability than existing vegetation. So you'll find that you are actually increasing the permeability of the site in retrospect to surface water. The recommendation comes with 19 conditions, and our client is happy to comply with them. And on that, again, on this basis, I urge you to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. If you'd like to return to your seat. And we have a third speaker, that is Ms. Spillane, who is objecting to the application. Ms. Spillane, please take your place at the microphone. And as you will know by now, you have 5 minutes, and I will let you know when you have a minute left. Thank you.
Evening, councillors. I'm Kelly Spillane and I live in Doric Lodge, which is next to the application site. Doric Lodge is in a court-appointed trust for my son Kai, who has cerebral palsy. It was purchased in September 21 with the sole intention of providing Kai with a quiet and tranquil place to live life to his full potential. When searching for the property, the location was a crucial factor, as Kai is extremely self-conscious and suffers with debilitating anxiety because of this. So by choosing within the Greenbelt and so close to the nature reserve, I and the deputies had considered there to be a minimal to non-existent risk of further surrounding development. After living here for 2 years, Kai has progressed from never leaving the house to regularly walking his dog and volunteering at the local charity shop. The potential increase of residents, over 50% in Lincoln Road and over 60% in Magnolia Road, is already having a detrimental impact on Kai. Doric Lodge was supposed to be a place that Kai could eventually feel safe and comfortable for the rest of his life. Due to Kai's disabilities, he is particularly sensitive to change in his surroundings, excess noise and visual stimulus. These factors can lead Kai to become distressed and highly anxious, which in turn causes him weight loss, panic attacks and withdrawal. The court-appointed deputies, along with myself, are therefore very concerned about the implications of this development on Kai's well-being. As a result, the deputies instructed planning consultants to issue a letter of objection. The objection letter set out a number of grounds of objection. I'm not a planning law expert and I don't intend to address the council on the majority of points set out. Instead, I'm using my time to explain the impact of the proposed development on my son. I appreciate the application has attracted a large amount of public interest, so if councillors understandably not had the time to read the letter of objection, I have copies with me, which I'm more than happy to hand out. The one legal point that I've been advised to make clear is, given Kai's disabilities, the council are under a legal duty to consider Kai's personal circumstances to satisfy themselves that the proposal will not adversely impact him. The legal basis for this obligation is set out in the objection letter submitted by the planning consultant, and as I understand it, comes from the Equality Act 2010. What I find highly concerning and disappointing is that the case officer's report at the very end of paragraph 4 states that an assessment under the Equality Act 2010 has taken place, which advises there would be no impact arising from the proposed development. I'm not sure how such an assessment was conducted, as no one from the council has been to see me, nor has the assessment carried out by the council been made public. The council were fully aware of Kai's disabilities, as it was clearly set out in the objection letter. I really therefore do not understand how council have reached such a conclusion, and I'd be very grateful if councillors, you could pick this point up with the case officer prior to voting to understand what steps were taken in the assessment. In any event, I completely disagree that the proposed development will not impact Kai. As well as giving rise to a built form on the neighbouring land that has potential to overlook into Doric Lodge, I note from the case officer's report that the site is to act as a base for at least 16 residents, with 12 of these occupants being children under the age of 16. The noise and disturbance that is likely to emanate from the application site at all hours of the day will be extreme, especially if the children living on the application site have friends over or decide to play on the farm vehicles, which will undoubtedly be purchased to assist with the upkeep of the equestrian site. The result of this will mean that Kai will be unable to enjoy the current peaceful amenity land in and around Doric Lodge, which will only serve to exacerbate his health conditions. Kai has had an extremely difficult life. His disabilities arise from a medical error at birth, and it's been a very uphill struggle from him since this time to develop any sense of self-confidence. However, since moving to Doric Lodge, he has vastly improved. The quiet surroundings have allowed Kai to come out of his shell, and his panic attacks that were very frequent have steadily started to reduce. As a mother, I am simply distraught that all of this progress is likely to be lost if this development takes place. I'm also here as a representative of the neighbours who are united in our concerns about the proposed planning application. We believe it has the potential to impact our quality of life and the character of our neighbourhood in significant ways, stated in over 130 comments received in objection to this planning application. It is heartening to know that there are alternative options available within the designated traveller sites that are available to rent or buy via a quick Google search that align with the criteria set out by the applicant rather than encroaching on our precious green space. This alternative also upholds the cultural and historical significance of our communities. I'm very grateful for the council have taken the time to listen to my position on behalf of Kai, myself and the surrounding neighbours. For the reasons set out above, along with those set out in the objection letter, we request that this application be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spillane. If you'd like to return to your seat. And I'd like to add my personal thanks to all the speakers tonight. I'm sure you're disappointed that you're not going to get a decision tonight, but obviously the decision will be coming in future. Now, I'm aware that members want to speak, but we do have a motion on the table. So, Councillor Constable, if you'd like to just reiterate your motion.
That the motion be deferred to allow for a site visit by members.
Okay, thank you. And I believe Councillor Myers, you're seconding it. Okay, so those in favour of the motion, please.
May I speak to the deferral?
Sorry.
Can we speak to the deferral?
Do apologise. Yes, you need to. I need to give time for you to speak to the motion. Please go ahead. Yes, Councillor Foster.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Chairman. I've got several points to make, but I just make one particular one, which is very relevant, which is I do believe that the approach roads, Magnolia and Lincoln Road, are totally inadequate for construction and caravan traffic. And I absolutely support the motion for deferral for a site visit.
Can I just emphasise that we are just speaking to the motion, and these are things that we can discuss when it comes back to the committee. Sorry, Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I would like to have a written deposition from Councillor Myra Weir, because I couldn't understand, unfortunately, a lot of what she had to say. And I think I get the gist that a lot of it is very important and we should take note of it. So if we can have a written, accurate deposition from her, I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
I had actually got that in mind to have a word with Councillor Weir afterwards, so I'll have a word with you after if that's okay. Councillor Mason, Mrs Mason, sorry.
Thank you. I know we're deferring this for a site visit, but before we do that, I'd like some clarity. I can understand the plan roughly, the stylised plan that the officers have put up there, but it bears no relation to the plan that we have in front of us. I can see there's a legend on there. Could the officers, we obviously can't read that legend from here. I'm assuming it's a legend regarding the various colours, etc. You've explained the proposed buildings, but the site itself is triangular. The part name yellow is not. So would you like to explain why those different colours are there and the significance, and perhaps the legend on there might help? And the white liner as well around it. Yeah, that's the plan we have, which, as you say, I know the site and I can visualise what's going on, but for members that don't know the site, that's quite confusing.
Yeah, so this is obviously the red line site, so it's triangular in shape, and you have the access towards the bottom of the junction with Lincoln Road and Magnolia Road. So if I go to the layout plan, and this is on public access as well, so you can see some of the triangular shapes. You have the access that would be retained at the bottom of the page, and then the triangular shape begins, and then it comes down. Obviously on the red line plan, it does carry on, and then it comes back down to meet. So there is a small part of the site that has been cut out of the plan, but that is just for the grazing of the horses. There is another plan. If I just find that one. So hopefully that demonstrates where the grazing land would be. So that's why it's just cut out of that. It's just so that you can see the detail of the site layout. So if I just go through that. So the orange colour is the hard standing or the permeable paving. The two dark blue rectangles are the mobile homes. The two pink rectangles are the day rooms. The two light blue rectangles are the touring caravans. If I zoom in a little bit further, you might be able to distinguish the lines of the on-site. So you can hopefully see that these ones are dashed with a line, whereas these ones here are circular with a line. So the ones which are circular with a line are paddock style fencing, whereas the ones that are dashed with the line are a closed board fence which would separate the two sites. You then have in between the mobile home and the day rooms these orange dashing, which marks the foul drainage. If I just go down further, you can see here marks a soakaway, and then this is slightly dashed. So if I zoom in, that might be a bit clearer to see. But you can see that. So that is proposed vegetation. This is also proposed trees and hedges. You have a proposed gate here. And then I go down to the access, and you can see that there is a post and rail fence and a gate, and then this is tarmac. If I just go up to the top of the site, so you can see the site boundaries. You can see that there is dashing here to show paddock fencing, which exists at the moment. And then again, so this is the edge of the plan, but you can see paddock fencing here, and then along that breaks up some of the grazing area. So that exists at the moment as well. I think some of it is a little bit dilapidated, but for the most part, there it is there. I think that's most of the points that are covered on the legend.
Thank you.
Okay, Mrs Mason, you okay with that?
Yes, no, I could see it, I could locate it, but I was aware that people that weren't familiar with the site, because the triangle wasn't shown in its entirety, were having difficulty understanding the positioning on the site. So I think it would be helpful to have that information before we have a site visit.
Yeah, okay. I think that explanation was very helpful.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you, Katie.
Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've been looking at satellite images of the site, the triangle. I found the triangle exactly where it is. There is a blue line. I take it that's a waterway, is it? What's the blue down there? Because on this satellite image, it shows trees or hedging right down that middle. So I need to understand what is the quality of those trees and hedging? Are they trees? Are they hedging? What are they? Because I can see where the shape of the yellow bit, the hard standing, will go, which will fit into a little triangle. When you look at the satellite picture, you could actually impose it on there. I just need to understand that.
Sorry, if I could interrupt there. I think this will be cleared when we come to go to the
Thank
site.
you.
So I think that's something we can actually clarify then, if that's okay. Anyone else want to speak to the motion? No? Okay, right. So we have a motion for deferral pending a site visit. Can I have an indication of those in favour, please? That is unanimous. So that item is deferred, and therefore
Chairman, if I may, just before you close the meeting, obviously the Trinders Avenue isn't not fit for this many cars that are going to be arriving there. So there needs to be some sort of where you're going to park, as you won't be able to park in Trinders Avenue.
yeah, I think this will be clarified on the site visit. So there are things that are aware
Would have to
there.
be outside of the Trinders
Yeah.
Avenue if you put cars. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that we can take that on board, and we'll be considering that on the site visit. I have one more item before we close, please. Items referred from the weekly list. There are none. Therefore, at 7 minutes to 9, I declare this meeting closed. Thank you, everyone, for attendance. Good night.
Thank you, Chairman.